Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Mind of Marlin for another treetop talk. The ducks are fed, the chickens are fed, and now it's time to feed your head. So recently I helped out at a middle school math class, and I was stunned to see that they were still teaching fractions. These poor students, they were flustered and flummoxed. Afterwards, I asked the instructor, "Why are you still teaching fractions and not metric? The whole world is using metric." Her answer was, "The federal government is to blame." In the words of Al Capone and other great mob bosses, not the feds again. Why is it that states can mandate an open internet, their own marijuana laws, their own speed limits, abortion laws, their own gun laws, but can't teach kids a metric system in their schools? How many of you watching this right now can figure 5 3/8 times 7 5/9? I thought so. Working with fractions is a complicated exercise. It takes a calculator. And that would be you, not the one in your hand. And you have to go through so many steps that it's easy to forget. I mean, no wonder kids turn to violent video games. It's a way to take out their frustration instead of breaking the formula over somebody's head. Now, here is an Egyptian measuring stick. Do you have your hieroglyphic converter handy? Here's the irony. The word fraction actually comes from the Latin word fractio, which means to break or broken. And break is the right word because it's a broken system the rest of the world fixed years ago. But America is still using a system of fractions that dates back to, wait for it, 1800 BC Egypt. Do you think it's time for an upgrade? I mean, if the Egyptians were using the decimal system, the pyramids probably would have been cubes because, it allows for a lot more office space. If you don't believe me, ask the owners of the Trans-American building in San Francisco. They'll tell you. Is it possible that our country is so fractious because we're still trying to figure out the difference between a numerator and a denominator? Do you even remember the difference? I thought so. You had to give it some thought. So here's the backstory. In 1670, a Frenchman by the name of Gabriel Mouton came up with a metric system and based it on the length of 1 minute of arc of the great circle of the Earth, now called a nautical mile, which is 852 meters. In 1790, while the French Revolution was in full swing and the guillotine was in full drop, the French Academy of Sciences refined the measurement to be a portion of the Earth's circumference, which is likely to remain constant unless we're hit by a comet, which may likely wipe out life on Earth as we know it. Intelligent life in Congress, as we know it, has been wiped out for years. Because this metric system was based on tens, it was simple. There was no need to calculate by 16 to convert ounces to pounds, or by 12 to convert an inch into a foot. Who wants to count to 12 when you have 10 fingers? Obviously, it's an alien plot because they have 6 fingers on each hand. If you didn't already forget, the inch was originally based on the width of a man's thumb. But then it got more precise because King Edward II, who lived in the 14th century, proclaimed the inch was to be equal to 3 grains of barley placed end to end. Well, pardon my 21st century expression, but what the fuck? Who eats barley? I mean, drink it, yes, and scotch and beer. And that pint? Don't get me started on where they got that measurement. Does it get more archaic than teaching our children a system of measurement based on something as arbitrary as 3 grains of barley laid end to end? But it gets weirder. Did you know that the yard was based on the circumference of a person's waist? I mean, whose waist? The average waist of the American male now is 39.7 inches. Using the waist measurement of the Earth is more constant, and nobody's going to ask the Earth to go on a diet. Once again, royalty stepped in to make it even more precise, and King Henry I, who lived between 1100 and 1135 AD, proclaimed that a yard was now the distance from the tip of his nose to the end of his thumb, with his arm outstretched, which is also where hitchhiking began. Flash forward to 1975, when Congress would pass the Metric Conversion Act to coordinate and plan the increasing use of the metric system in the United States. So what happened? Why are we still teaching children fractions instead of the decimal-based metric system like the rest of the world? Because it was a voluntary conversion, and there was so much apathy. Yeah, I know, you don't care. And there was so much resistance and ridicule during the Reagan years that the effort of the United States Metric Board was abandoned, as was all hope. Because the United States Metric Board didn't have a clear mandate from Congress, a national program was never instituted. What other national program hasn't been instituted? I know, the COVID response. But I digress. Are you assured that Congress continues to hold on to some of its traditions, like never being clear or possessing any political will? The United States is standing fast with countries like Myanmar, Liberia, Palau, Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, and Samoa when it comes to this antiquated systems, because they're the only other countries in the world using it. There's about 58 million people in those countries, and 52 million of them are in Myanmar. There are 7.5 billion people in the world, and the fraction looks like that. I'm not even going to try to say it. Which means our fractional system of measurement is aligned with a fractional portion of the world. How apropos. To be fair, Liberia was created by former slaves of America, so it's understandable they would still be using that system. Myanmar is the second largest producer of opium in the world, so that part is also understandable. Your children and their future is compromised and intellectually crippled by continuing to teach them an outdated, archaic, and particularly isolated from the rest of the world method of measurement. I know, so long as you don't have to do the math, it's just not your problem. Thanks for tuning in. Take care out there, everybody. Wash your hands, wear your mask, love one another, love yourself, and we'll see you next time. Aloha.